This is The Road Show, and I'm your host, David Warren. Let me start today's program by reading you the back cover of an interesting new book. It says, "Everywhere around you are distractions. That text you respond to quickly, just to get it out of the way. That newest money-making side hustle to cross your mind. The evening spent organizing your overflowing kitchen cupboards. Disruptions are the enemies of a life well lived, both the new distractions of our generation and timeless ones that have existed for centuries. They all add up to make you feel restless, tired, and unfulfilled much of the time. They're keeping you from living with joy, from accomplishing the good that only you can do. But that can change today." The name of this new book is Things That Matter, and its author is our guest for the hour. Let's welcome back Joshua Becker. I have so looked forward to this, Joshua.
Well, I'm looking forward to the conversation as well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we were going to talk about this book a few months back, but you were just getting ready to go out on a nationwide speaking tour, so we delayed it until now. So how did the tour go? How was your message received?
The tour was fabulous. As a writer, I spend a lot of my time behind a computer screen in an empty room. And so always to get out and meet people and get to hear some of the stories of how the book has impacted people's lives and what they appreciate most about it. It's always very encouraging to me. People would always say, "Thanks for coming." We visited 12 cities, and I always said, "Thank you for coming," because it really encourages me to keep doing what I'm doing.
Well, before we talk about the message that's contained in your new book, Things That Matter, let's back up to our first interview back in 2017 when we talked about you developing a minimalist lifestyle. I think that would be a great place to start because it will launch us into the new book, but recap your story. It all began on a Memorial Day back in 2008.
2008, my kids were 5 and 2. I was living up in Vermont. Memorial Day weekend, we set out to do our spring cleaning after the long winter. I went out to clean out the garage, hoping that my 5-year-old son would enjoy the project with me, but he lasted about 30 seconds, and then he was in the backyard playing with his toys. But the garage project ended up taking me hours. Really, just one thing led to another and led to another. And so I got my 5-year-old son asking me to come play with him. I got this garage project that just keeps taking longer and longer and adding more and more frustration onto my shoulders. I struck up a conversation with my neighbor who was doing all of her yard work the entire time I was working on the garage. And I started complaining a little bit about all the time that had gone into my spring cleaning the garage. And she really changed my life with one sentence. She said, "That's why my daughter is a minimalist. She keeps telling me I don't need to own all this stuff." And I remember looking over at my driveway, which at this point was filled with all these dirty, dusty things that I'd been sorting out. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw my 5-year-old son swinging alone on the swing set where he'd been all morning long. And I suddenly realized that not only were my possessions not making me happy, which most of us would say, but I noticed that my possessions were actually taking me away from the very thing that did bring me happiness in life and meaning and purpose and significance. And it's one thing to say our possessions aren't making us happy. It's something very different the moment we realize that they might actually be distracting us from the very things that do bring us happiness. So that was the start of my journey into intentionally owning less and minimalism, and formed the basis for the book, The More of Less, and then eventually another book, The Minimalist Home.
So that particular day, the stuff in your garage was what was keeping you from what mattered, and that was spending time with your son.
Yes, it was the moment I got clarity on how my possessions were keeping me from things that matter. So They had been for many years, and there are other things I think in life that keep us from meaning and fulfillment. But that was the light bulb moment where I noticed it and recognized it so clearly.
How long did it take you till you felt like you really had arrived at a minimalist lifestyle?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I ever feel fully arrived. Life changes, seasons of life change, kids get older, and so even careers change, and where we live has changed. And so I think there's always a constant evaluation of, hey, are the things that I own helping me fulfill my purpose, or are the things that I own distracting me from my purpose? So there's constant evaluation. But the timeframes I usually give is it took us about 3 months to go through the lived-in areas of our home. Mm-hmm. I always refer to them as the living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom. It took us about 3 months to go through those areas. It took us 9 months if you want to add in the basement, the garage. There was a shed in the backyard. And so some of those areas just took a little more time and a little more effort than the rooms you use every day. So 3 months, 9 months, and then 3 years later, we moved from Vermont to Arizona. And when we moved to Arizona, we bought a smaller house than the home that we had in Vermont. So even got rid of a few more things along that way as well.
So how did you become a leading voice in the modern simplicity movement? A lot of people are minimalized, but a lot of people aren't Joshua Becker.
There's only one, but there's only one of everyone, of course. So I started a blog that very first weekend. That was a Saturday afternoon. My neighbor told me the word minimalism. On Monday afternoon, I started a blog, becomingminimalist.com, and it was just going to be a personal journal, a diary, things we were getting rid of, things we were keeping, what I was learning along the way. We were just going to share our story. And people really resonated with it. People found it pretty quickly. There are some different ways to search out different words online. And so people were finding it, and it was growing. And after about a year and a half of just talking about my own stuff and what I was learning, kind of changed my focus and thought to myself, okay, rather than me just talking about the things that I'm learning, how can I help others own less? How can I play my neighbor's role in other people's lives? Mm-hmm. And so began writing in that sort of way, trying to introduce this lifestyle to more people and invite people to the life-giving benefits of owning less. And I don't know, I guess I got a knack for writing, and so people were drawn to it. I think what people like about becoming minimalist is that it's more than just how to declutter your kitchen, how to declutter your spice cabinet. There's always a deeper meaning behind it. Hey, we're doing this so that we can live out bigger purposes in our lives, and we're not becoming minimalist so that we can check out of life, but we're pursuing owning less so that we can direct our limited resources towards things that matter more in the long run.
Joshua, I'm curious to see if you agree with me or not, but our listening audience does not know yet that you were a pastor for many years. So in a way, you're pastoring a new group of people with this message.
I loved pastoring. I thought I would do it for the rest of my life. A lot of people, there's a lot of people whose goal in life is to quit their job and become a writer. But that was never mine. I loved writing. I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to do. I mean, I loved pastoring. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to be doing in the world. But there reached a point where I couldn't do both well. The blog kept growing, and I was getting asked to speak a little bit more, and I was getting a lot more emails and questions from people. And so there came a point where I had to decide, what is the role that I want to play in the world, even that God would want me to play in the world. And I looked around and I thought to myself, there are a lot of pastors who pastor better than I do, but there are not a lot of people writing online about minimalism and owning less as well as I do. So that's how I ended up deciding. That was about a 3-year process of deciding to leave that career to do what I'm doing now.
Well, God has truly blessed what you do. The name of the website again, jot this down, listeners, becomingminimalist.com. And we'll talk more about the website in just a bit. But 1.5 million readers of the website per month. And I checked out your Facebook page, and you have 2.4 million followers and growing so far. So this message is really resonating with people. I'm David Warren speaking with Joshua Becker. When we come back, we'll dive into the new book, Things That Matter. And the way I interpret this book, it's a guidebook for those who desire to create the energy, time, and focus in order to do the things in life that matter. We'll discuss that after this. I'm David Warren, here with some exciting news for Oasis listeners. We have a new mobile device app. It's free, easy to download, and lets you enjoy our refreshing music and talk everywhere you go. If you have an Android cell phone, go to the Google Play Store. And if you have an iPhone or iPad, visit the Apple Store and search for Oasis Radio Network. Be an Oasis ambassador and share this news with family and friends around the world.
There's food for the hungry, joy for the sad. I found an oasis of love. Oasis Network.
Joshua Becker is with us again today, and I'm so excited because Joshua's last interview is in our top 5 most listened to archives of all time here at Oasis Radio Network. So the message of, well, tell us what your definition of minimalism is, because that's really your message as well, Joshua.
Sure. It's either the message or you're just a really good interviewer that day, and maybe you're the reason that it was in the top 5.
I'd like to believe that.
I define minimalism as minimalism is the intentional promotion of the things we most value in life by removing anything that distracts us from it. And so when most people hear the word minimalism, they think of physical possessions, which is a great way to think about it. Our possessions take time, they take money, they take energy, they take focus. And so the more we have, the more of those resources we have to dedicate towards it. And it's not just all the things that we have, it's all the things that we want to have. And so we continue to spend time and spend our lives researching things to buy, trying to make money to buy things that we want to buy, going out to buy them, returning them, taking care of them. So when most people hear the word minimalism, they think of physical possessions, which is great. That's where I started. But there are, other places in life where we can apply these same principles of, this, the way we spend our time, the habits that we have in our lives, that these things are actually not promoting my values. They're actually distracting me from them.
The name of the new book is Things That Matter by today's guest, Joshua Becker. I'm David Warren, your host on the program today. And in preparation for the new book, Joshua, you conducted a nationwide survey. What was the survey and what were the results?
The survey was, so when I tell people the title of the book, Things That Matter, Overcoming Distraction to Pursue a More Meaningful Life, people think to themselves, that's a book I need to read because I need to put my phone away. And there's a chapter on technology and there's a chapter on the trivial in the book. But the book actually gets into many deeper distractions than that. Distractions like the pursuit of money, the pursuit of possessions, the pursuit of leisure, even the pursuit of past mistakes and regrets. And so we wanted to do the survey, number one, to test my assumptions a little bit about, hey, is this actually a distraction for just me, or is this a distraction for other people? It also helped us put together the book pretty well. So we surveyed America, and yeah, there were some pretty fascinating statistics, or some ones that I guess aligned with what I assumed to be true. 80% of Americans think they'll be happier if they have more money. And then that translates to roughly 75% of Americans who say that their desire for money impacts their daily decisions. The most heartbreaking statistic, I always quote this one because I think heartbreaking is the word. 69% of Americans say that they cannot live the life they want because of a mistake they committed in their past. And 55% of Americans say that they cannot live the life they want because of a mistake committed against them in the past. And of course, sometimes mistake isn't the right word for the evil that might have been done to them. But man, that is a lot of potential, 70% and 55%. And that's a lot of people who say they can't live the life they want because of something that happened in their past. And so having that conversation became an important part of the book for sure.
Well, that's when I think that your pastoring comes in, your background in pastoring, because 2 of the 8 major distractions to doing the things that matter are distractions of a paralyzed will, which would be the distraction of fear and the distraction of past mistakes. So that's, again, where I think your pastoring comes in. But then there are also 6 distractions of the lesser good. The distractions of technology, leisure, applause, possessions, money, and happiness. And you admit in the book, Things That Matter, that your biggest struggle is the distraction of applause. So can you tell us more about this struggle?
I wonder if I would have been able to articulate this 14 years ago before finding minimalism. Probably not. Maybe even a decade and a half ago, possessions were my biggest distraction in life. I'm not sure. But I found minimalism and was really drawn to the idea of purposefully owning fewer things so that I could live a bigger life, focus on more important things. And so I was drawn to that pretty quickly. I began wrestling almost immediately with the idea of money. If I'm going to buy fewer things, what is the role that money is going to play in my life? What's the point of money if it's not to buy a lot of stuff? And so those both became chapters in the book. But not too long after that, there was a story that really solidified this in my mind. I had released a book called Clutter Free with Kids, which spent 2 weeks as the #1 parenting book on Amazon. My Facebook page that you mentioned earlier had just passed 100,000 followers, and my blog had 1 million visitors that month or something like that. Like pretty important milestones. And a week later, there were 2 guys, Joshua and Ryan, and they were featured on the homepage of Yahoo as being this voice of minimalism. And I became so jealous that they were featured rather than me. And I mean, it's not good. I'm not proud of this story, but it was a moment of, hey, I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, but these people got, and it's the same story. I mean, the same message. I should be happy for them, but I became very jealous of the accolades, the praise, the reputation that they were receiving. And I started to recognize, hey, there's a lot of things that I do in life, a lot of things that we do in life to get noticed, to seek out praise that might actually not be the most important work that we can be doing in the world. And so I always trace it a little bit back to childhood. I have a twin brother, and we have a great family, wonderful parents, stable family. They loved us all the same, but my brother was the star athlete in our high school, and I was small and scrawny. And so I always think even in childhood, he was getting, more praise. He was in the local paper more than I was. And so maybe I've spent my entire lifetime trying to cover that up.
Well, there's a parallel with a search for approval. So your biggest distraction, you admitted in the book, was the distraction of applause.
Yeah. And, I think it's true that different distractions affect people differently and maybe even at different times in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I might have said that possessions were my biggest distraction 14 years ago, but now I can really see how applause, wanting to be noticed, wanting to seek out praise, even, a little bit about my career and just trying to make a living online. And it's very easy to chase social media likes or followers. And sometimes the best way to get a following online isn't to do work that matters. And so keeping that constant tension in check on, hey, I need to focus on doing work that is lasting and fulfilling and allowing the praise to come naturally as opposed to seeking that out purposefully.
So you have to keep yourself in check on that as well as possessions.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you do that?
I think the way we do that is just like any of the other distractions listed in the book, and there's practical steps to overcome different ones at different times. But for me, I think it's when I'm doing good work or when I'm living my life focused on things that matter, that becomes the reward in and of itself. The reward isn't how many people read my blog that day, but the reward is, hey, I lived today for things that actually matter. And I think that when we do that, people will notice.
Mm-hmm.
The mom down the street who's struggling with her teenage kids might look to you for help. I think that when we do things that matter, it gets noticed, but that becomes the reward in and of itself.
I think
if that makes sense.
It sure does. I think of the scripture, seek ye first the kingdom of God. In other words, focus on things that matter, things of God. And then all these other things, all the 2.4 million Facebook followers will follow. But that's not what you went into this for, was to get 2.4 million Facebook followers. Hey, when your life was minimalized, I'll use that, you were then able to focus on things that really mattered to you and still matter to you, and that is creating hope for orphans. Tell us about how getting rid of the distraction of possessions and getting rid of the new distraction of applause gives you the time, the energy, the focus to do what's important to you, what matters to you. And that, again, is creating hope for orphans through what you founded called the Hope Effect. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we started the Hope Effect back in 2015. The birth of the nonprofit came out of the books that I've written, The More of Less, The Minimalist Home, and Things That Matter. When I first signed the contract to write the book, The More of Less and The Minimalist Home, we had minimized our possessions. We had moved into a smaller home. And so we needed much less money to live on than we needed before. And then this book contract comes really out of nowhere. And I remember turning to my wife and I said, well, what are we going to do with the money? Like, are we going to go buy a bigger house? Are we going to go buy a bigger screen television? Are we going to replace the furniture in the living room? Or what are we going to do with really this excess funding that was coming in? And of course, we both knew that we weren't going to change the way that we were living. We had found so much joy and meaning in it. And so we said, well, let's do something important in the world with it. And so with the help of my friend Joe Derigo and his wife, Christy Derigo, we founded the Hope Effect. They were actually the one to share this problem with us, but we've known for decades, actually, that institutional orphanages don't work very well for children. the orphanage that you picture when you picture an orphanage, 4 walls and a whole bunch of kids and a couple adults coming and going, that kids fall behind in every stage of human development when they grow up in that type of institutionalized orphanage. And so we work in nations that still use that model for orphan care, and we work with them to change laws. We work with other partners, and our goal is to get children out of orphanages and into families. And the reality is that only 1% of orphans ever get adopted. And so how we care for those other 99% matters quite a bit. So we work in Mexico, we work in Honduras, we're in Thailand, and moving into Cambodia this fall, always with the hope of, getting kids out of orphanages and into families. Yeah. Every child deserves a family. That's our motto.
And you would not have been able to do all this had you have had that distraction of the garage continuing until today.
I mean, I think that we would just have lived like most people live, right? You keep the money, you save the money, you buy the stuff.
Right. And now look what you're doing. Where can people find out more information about the Hope Effect?
The website is thehopeeffect.com.
thehopeeffect.com. And your other website again, becomingminimalist.com. I'm David Warren, speaking once again with Joshua Becker, the author of the new book, Things That Matter. And when we come back, we're going to discuss what to do with all those emails, notifications, and pings that we all get on our smartphones. Today's guest says, resisting distractions is a battle worth fighting. We'll talk about that after this.
The Road Show is a listener favorite, which airs each weekday here on the Oasis Radio Network, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Road Show also has a great section on our website, oasisnetwork.org. There you'll find audio archives of select past interviews, plus guest lineup, and contact information and links to our Road Show sponsors and its hosts. So join us for the Road Show, whether on your radio or on your computer at oasisnetwork.org.
Here's a little bit about today's guest, Joshua Becker. He is the best-selling author of The More of Less and The Minimalist Home, and he's the founder of Becoming Minimalist, a blog and website dedicated to inspiring others to find more life by owning less. Joshua is also the founder of The Hope Effect, a nonprofit organization that is changing how the world cares for orphans. Joshua and his family now live in Peoria, Arizona. And I looked that up, Joshua, and that's I guess that's a part of Phoenix, isn't it?
Yes, we are the furthest northwest suburb of Phoenix.
Okay, well, just down the road, I had to look this up too, where Mesa, Arizona is, you attended a conference, and that's where this book, Things That Matter, was birthed. Tell us about that experience.
I attended a conference put on by a guy named Charlie Gilkey, who had just written a book called Start Finishing, and it's literally a book about finishing the projects that you start. And so he asked us at the very beginning of the workshop, he said, now I want you to apply the principles we're going to talk about to something very specific in your life. And so close your eyes and answer this one question, which is just a brilliant question, and people have really resonated with it in the book. Close your eyes and answer this question. If you were to die today, what is the one thing in your life you would most regret not finishing? And there was a mom next to me, and she shared about, I would regret not fully preparing my kids for life. There was a young woman at the table. She talked about an art project that she hadn't completed that she'd been working on. And for me, it was this book. It immediately popped into my mind. It's a book about taking the principles of minimalism and applying it to other areas other than physical possessions. And so that's where this book was birthed. I literally emailed my literary agent later that week, and I said, I think this is a book I should write. Do you think this is a book that's needed? And once we both agreed yes, then that became the start of it.
The name of the new book is Things That Matter, and by the way, it's available wherever books are sold. Joshua Becker is the author, also today's guest, and he also reads the audio version on audible.com. And Joshua, I listened twice, and you're a good reader.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm David Warren, your host today, and the subtitle of Things That Matter is Overcoming Distraction to Pursue a More Meaningful Life. In the survey we touched on earlier, 57% of the respondents said that they are somewhat or a great deal kept from fulfilling their purpose in life because of the distraction of technology. So Joshua, what's the answer? I mean, it's kind of like fire, as you mentioned in the book. I mean, fire has its purpose, but then fire can be dangerous. Same with technology.
Yeah. What's the answer? Good one. For me, the answer centers on two things. There's both a theoretical thing that we need to think through when it comes to technology, and then there's a practical step that I think really helps people. Number one, theoretical. Technology can be an incredible gift to us. It allows us to stay in touch with friends. It allows us to amplify our voice. It allows us to do what we're doing today. It allows me to do what I do. And so technology can be good. We can use technology to create good. We can use technology to make a positive difference in the world. Or technology can just be used for mindless consumption, playing another video game, scrolling on social media, watching another season of something that is streaming on our television. And so really recognizing, when am I using technology to create good in the world, and when am I just allowing it to consume my time and my energy? I think that's the theoretical thing that we need to think through, and hopefully we use it more for good and less for just wasting time. The second thing is I encourage everybody to take a technology break, take a significant fast, whether it's 2 weeks or whether it's a month, and literally set it all aside. Turn off the television for a month, turn off social media for a month, put your phone away for a month if you can, only use your computer for work for a month. And when you take that time away to really separate yourself from it, I think that you always come back with a little more appreciation of how much of a distraction it has become. I think that we can start to see, okay, this part of my phone really was feeding my soul, but this part was just draining life from me. And I think that time away is what we need to evaluate well.
There's a great quote in Things That Matter attributed to Cal Newport. He said, "The ability to stay focused will be the superpower of the 21st century." That resonated with me, Joshua.
Yeah. It is true what I say in the book, that distractions are not new. I think that society probably had the exact same conversations when television was born. Now we're just wasting our evenings watching TV. We probably said the same thing when radio came out. Now we're just going to listen to the radio rather than use our brains. And so maybe even when books were first being published, I think that this idea of distraction has always been with us. But today it is so ubiquitous. Today it is all around us all of the time. Even when I was a kid, if we were going to play video games, we had to leave the living room and go to the other television in the basement to play video games. Mm-hmm. Like you had to physically move spaces to go do it. But now we're at the restaurant, we're at our work, we're at our desk. It's just always around us at a level that it's never been before. And so learning to control distractions is the step that I think that we're all as a society trying to learn and trying to figure out. Meanwhile, we've got some of the best brains in the world and largest companies in the world trying to keep us tied to their technology. So it's a battle that we need to fight.
Well, the goal of the new book by Joshua, Things That Matter, is also the goal of today's roadshow, and that is to pursue a more meaningful life. But how do we do that? We have to overcome distractions. I listed them earlier, but the two distractions of a paralyzed will are the distraction of fear holding you back, the distraction of past mistakes holding you back from pursuing that more meaningful life, that thing that God has called, that He's placed in each of us that our insides really want to do, but we're going to have to make the space for it. There are also distractions of the lesser good. Technology we've touched on, leisure, applause, possessions, money, and happiness. What? The distraction of happiness. Joshua, what does that mean?
The way I explain it in the book is there are really two pursuits that I think are pretty common to us. The pursuit of self, survival at the least, nothing wrong with that. The pursuit of happiness, which I don't think there's anything wrong in us pursuing those things that are going to satisfy us most. Jesus even talked about us living the most abundant life that we can. The problem becomes when we confuse the two and we begin to pursue happiness in the pursuit of self. And me getting everything that I want is where I'm going to find happiness. When in reality, not only does the Bible speak to this, but like every study and every research that's ever been done by any institution everywhere says the exact same thing, that when we live selfless lives, that when we volunteer, when we give, when we serve others, when we help others, that people who are generous with their money and generous with their time always reach the end of their lives with greater sense of well-being and greater sense of fulfillment and higher levels of happiness.
One of the distractions I just mentioned was the pursuit of money. And there's a very interesting section in your book called Today versus Tomorrow. And you had learned the value of getting rid of the distraction of seeking money. And your sister Jana was a little concerned for your future. Will you tell us that story?
The story goes back to when we founded the Hope Effect with the book advance money from the More of Less and the Minimalist Home. And I remember asking my sister, I was in the backyard on the phone, and she's like, well, what are you guys going to do with the money? And I said, I think we're going to use it to start a nonprofit organization. And I remember asking, I said, what would you do with it? And she said, I would probably save it for my child's college education. And my first thought was, that's actually a good idea. I wonder why that didn't cross my mind. But I responded to her and I said, yeah, but Jana, do you think that if we use this money to help orphaned children get families around the world, that when my kids reach college age, that God's not going to provide for them to go to college? I just don't think that that is the way that God works, that if He calls me to do something, and if He calls me to give in this specific of a way, then certainly He's going to be there to provide in the future. And I'll be quick to say here that, Proverbs speaks about the wisdom of saving. And so saving is good, and we should be saving. Just as God calls us to do, we shouldn't be spending every dollar that comes our way. But I think there comes a point where we can save too much. Mm-hmm. And I'm saving my money for some potential need that might arise in the future. But I'm doing that at the expense of someone's very real need today that I can meet. And learning, I think, to find that balance better is important to us, because it can become too easy just to save money and have no end goal in mind of like, well, how much do I need to save?
Right.
Every financial advisor will tell me that I need to be saving more than I'm saving now. And I think balancing that a little bit with, wait, there's a good that I can do right now with my money. And so how do I balance that call for generosity and also that call to save for the future?
As I said earlier, Joshua Becker is a leading voice in the modern simplicity movement. And you say in your book, Things That Matter, every time someone tells me I could never be a minimalist, I think to myself, but you already are, because everybody is minimizing something. If you're not minimizing your possessions, you're minimizing your money, time, and potential. Joshua, for those of us who want to pursue a meaningful life, but our big distraction is possessions, and we feel on the inside it is time for us to minimize, you have a book also available called The Minimalist Home. Tell us about that book.
The Minimalist Home is, the subtitle is A Room-by-Room Guide to a Refocused, Decluttered Life. And it is very specific in nature. It goes through 18 different rooms, 18 different areas in our home, and it offers practical steps to begin decluttering. My model, the philosophy that I always think is the most helpful for the most number of people, is to, number one, to understand the bigger reason behind minimizing, the bigger reason behind decluttering. I'm not decluttering just so that I can own less stuff. I'm decluttering my stuff so that I can spend more time with my family, so that I can give more money to things that matter, so that I can accomplish more good in the world, whatever that is very specifically in your life. And then we begin working through our homes, easiest to hardest, starting with the most lived in areas first. And so people hear about minimalism, they hear about decluttering, and they think, I need to declutter my garage. And you spend an hour and a half in your garage and you see no change and you're frustrated and you give up on the whole process. But meanwhile, you could spend an hour and a half in your living room or an hour and a half in your bedroom and probably make a pretty significant dent, so much so that at the end of the day, your bedroom actually feels a little bit lighter and a little bit less stressful than it was before. And so that's the process that I lay out in the book, starting with these spaces that we spend time in, the spaces that we can complete, and then working to some of those harder areas later.
Excellent. So the name of that book is The Minimalist Home, and the new book is called Things That Matter. These books are available wherever books are sold. They're also available in audio version on the website audible.com, again by today's special guest, Joshua Becker. His website is becomingminimalist.com, becomingminimalist.com. Well, I am David Warren, your host, and when we come back for our final moments, we'll get some final thoughts from Joshua Becker. I'm David Warren, Program Director at Oasis Radio Network and one of the hosts of this podcast. All of our hosts enjoy hearing from you, our listening family, so drop us a note. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and you'll receive new episodes on your mobile devices. And now, back to the show. It has been such a joy to have back with us Joshua Becker. My name is David Warren, and I am a big JB fan here. I have read, of course, your first book, which we discussed the first time you were on with us, The More of Less, and then I have now read your latest book, Things That Matter, Overcoming Distraction to Pursue a More Meaningful Life. And then for those who need help with minimizing, you have the book called The Minimalist Home. All these books are available by Joshua Becker wherever books are sold, and also the audio versions on the website audible.com. And I want to mention the website for the Hope Effect, which is helping orphans around the world with this very unique way that Joshua and his friends do it. And that website is hopeeffect.com, hopeeffect.com. And Joshua, I think probably the best way to wrap today is to mention a story that you told in the new book, Things That Matter, about your first book that you and I talked about, The More of Less. And that's when you introduced your story and how others can really free up their lives by minimizing. And then again, the new book is how you can use that extra space to change the world by doing the things that really, really matter. But anyhow, back to that first book, The More of Less, when you're introducing the concept of minimizing to others, to your readers and listeners. Tell us what the cover is, first of all. What does the cover of that book look like?
The cover of the book, it's an empty suitcase with a bright light coming out of it.
Okay. But tell us what the artist's rendition was the first time they pitched you a book cover idea for The More of Less.
Yeah. As with most books, they asked me, what do you picture being on the cover of this book, The More of Less, a book about minimalism? And I had no idea. I didn't even know I was going to get asked. I said, I don't know. I can tell you what I don't want on the cover. I don't want plastic chairs on a beach. And I said that because I knew that is what they were going to want to put on the cover, or that's the first thing that was going to come into their mind when they think of minimalism. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying, this is not a book about checking out of life. This is not a book about owning less stuff so you can go lay on a beach for the rest of your life. This is a book about owning less stuff so that you can discover what's most important to you and your family. And so that was our original conversation. 3 months later, we still didn't have a cover. They sent me an email. I was in an airport in Charlotte, and they said, time's up. We need to have a cover. And they sent me a cover of plastic chairs on a beach. And it was an anxious weekend till I could finally call them on Monday morning and say, that's the one cover that it can't be. And so we finally settled on this. I think it's the suitcase with the light coming out of it, a little bit of the parable of the pearl of great price, a little bit of let's get rid of the things that don't matter so that we can focus on the things that actually do.
Hey, do you have your book, the new one, available, Things That Matter? As we close, I'd like you to read something from page 9.
Yeah, I got a copy right here.
And as you flip there, you write, with that in mind, I want to share with you a quote that has meant a great deal to me for many years now. It's from Seneca the Younger, a Roman philosopher born about the same time as Jesus of Nazareth. As we say goodbye, read us this quote.
It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. But when life is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last by death's final constraint to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing. So it is, we are not given a short life, but we make it short, and we are not ill-supplied, but wasteful of it. Life is long if you know how to use it.
Well said. Things That Matter is the name of the new book by today's special guest, Joshua Becker. And before we actually do say goodbye, what's next for you, Joshua?
That is a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm going to use the next couple months and try to figure that out. So, thanks for asking. But this book, in many ways, was a culmination of what I've been writing about minimalism, and so I'm trying to figure out what the next step is. Next thing that God would have me do in the world. Well, your assignment is to get inspired and write another book and be back on the roadshow with us very soon. I look forward to it. All right. Well, for Joshua Becker, I'm David Warren, and it's been another great roadshow.
You've been listening to The Roadshow. If you'd like to write to us, here's our address. The Roadshow, P.O. Box 1924, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74101. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. The views of today's guest aren't necessarily those of this station, but we do appreciate and thank our guest for spending this time with us. The Roadshow,
an Oasis Network presentation.